Hello and welcome to another Rust Locker video, and today I'm going to be working on the Civic. I need to change the rear brake discs and pads because I'm hearing like some quite bad brake noise just driving along. I can hear a shoo, 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 shoo sort of sound, and I'm starting to hear the squeal of the tab that lets you know your brake pads are wearing down, the wear indicator. That's starting to sound a bit bad now, so I'm going to change the rear brake discs and the rear brake pads. But before I crack on with that, just a quick message to say, if you haven't subscribed already, please do subscribe and hit the notification bell. That'd mean a lot to me. And without further ado, let's crack on with sorting out these brakes. Here we've got some new rear brake discs and some new rear brake pads, and funnily enough the Brembos weren't actually that much more expensive than the other brands, so I went for these. I just went and got some of the cheaper discs. I also got Brembo pads for the front. Having a quick look though, I don't think the fronts actually need doing, so I'm not sure if I'm going to bother doing those today or not, but we'll see. But definitely the rears need doing. Okay, so I haven't got my good jack here, so I've got the crappy Halfords jack. I've got another Widowmaker on this side, but I have got axle stands underneath there on the subframe, so don't worry about that. As you can hear, that's pretty grindy. And I also chuck a tyre or chuck a wheel under the sill there, just as an extra added precaution. Yeah, that's pretty grindy, and they're binding on a little bit at that point. And I think the brake disc might be a bit warped as well. So what I've got to do now is undo the caliper. There's two bolts at the back to pull the caliper away from the brake pads, and there's another two bolts to take away the brake caliper bracket so that I can get to the brake disc. A couple of screws there and there to undo. So I'm going to coat all this in WD-40 first. Okay, so the first bolt on the brake caliper bracket I managed to get off with a breaker bar, but it was still proper solid. So the next part I've got to do is this top one here, and that'll take the whole sort of caliper assembly off, but I also need to undo these two bolts before I do that, just to otherwise they'll be difficult to undo. And the two caliper pin bolts, they're just 12mm, and they're proper rusted on as well, and you need a small or shallow socket to get in there, so I'm just using this pipe on the end of this to give me some more leverage. Okay, so that's one. The bottom one, as you can see, is difficult to get to. Luckily I managed to break it with just a ring spanner, so if you need to get a socket in there you probably have to disconnect the brake pipe to get to it, which is going to be even more of a pain, but luckily spanner worked for me on there. So if I undo that bottom one there, and this top one, now the brake caliper should slide off of the brake pads. Okay, so it's actually, see this little tab thing here? I had to get a screwdriver in and kind of pry it there and pry it on the bottom as well, and then the caliper pinged off like that. Okay, so now that the caliper's off like that, you can get to the other bolt at the top here to undo the bracket a lot easier, because we can put the caliper up like that and get something easier in there. Okay, so trying to get the brake pads out, just going to lever them out like that. Okay, so there's a couple of these little slide pin things. I'm going to pull these out just because I'm going to re-grease them when I put them back in. So I'm going to pull these two out. So by lifting the caliper up like that, you can get a socket in there just about with an extension on it. Oh, there's a big shock on the shoulder. Okay, so now that I've got the brake caliper bracket detached from the car, as you can see there's like these little shim things that the brake pads sort of slide against, and what's happened is as this has got rusty, it's actually pushed this out a bit, which means there's less space for the brake pads to slide. So if I show you on this new one, brake pad kind of fits in that gap there, but as you can see it doesn't fit in that gap there because there's so much rust behind these clips that it's pushed it out. So what I need to do is take these clips off and clean up all the rust and crust from behind there so that these will fit back in. So the problem was that the old ones had actually kind of got wedged and proper like got wedged on, so they were on all the time, which proper wore the pads down. This is one of the pads, one of the old ones. You can see there's nothing left on that at all. New pad, old pad. So yeah, this had kind of got wedged in and was on all the time, so completely destroyed it. So you can see the crust build up. So I'm just going to get my file on it. Right, so I've cleaned up the little bits there where the shims go in. Just got some of that dust off. So now I'll just put the shims back in. Now the brake pads, hopefully, yes, slot in there, and it's still a little bit tight, so I might just shave a little bit more down, but as you can see they actually fit in there now, they didn't before. So yeah, still quite tight. Obviously don't want it to be too loose, but I think I might take that down a little bit more. Okay, so now we've got actually got some good movement forwards and backwards there, so that's going to be good. Okay, so I made a bit of an error here. I should have undone these two screws before I detached the caliper, because I can't put the brakes on now, and when you go to undo your screw, it's a little bit annoying. So what I've done was I wedged a pole in between the lugs like that, and that stops it moving. Okay, brake discs off. Now then, let's have a look behind here. This dust shield is actually in a lot better condition than the other side. It's almost solid, in fact. So I might put a bit of cure rust on that just to keep it in one piece for a bit longer before I put everything back together. Clear off some of this rust, but I'll sort that out in a minute. So we've got all the brakes all apart. Now then, before I put the disc back, a new disc on or anything like that, I'm going to wind back the piston in the caliper so that there's enough space for the new pads. Right, so to wind back the caliper you need a pair of pliers, and you see there's like divots on the piston there, and if you get your pliers just in those little divots on the piston, you can rotate the piston clockwise and anti-clockwise. So I believe turning it clockwise will wind it back in towards the caliper, turning it anti-clockwise will bring it out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it out a little bit. I've put a bit of WD-40 around there just to try and clean out some of the rusty particles from in there. But then I'm just going to use these pliers just to wind it back up. Right, so cure rust is going off nicely on that hub protector thingy, shield, dust shield, whatever that's called. I've wound the piston back as far as I could into here. It looks a little bit wonky, but I can't actually... I think the piston's a little bit wonky, like it's coming out. There's more of a big angle at the top than there is at the bottom, but I can't tell because of the rubber bung thing. But don't know, maybe I'll need a new caliper, but I'm going to see what happens. But anyway, so I've wound the piston back as far as I can, so hopefully I'll be able to fit the new brake pads in there. I'm just going to wait for all this to dry before I start putting things back together. But made some good progress round on the other side. So we've got new brake pads fitted there, new disc fitted here. But as you may notice, this doesn't have a dust shield anymore, and that is because it was completely rusted away. There was absolutely nothing left of it. This is what was left. So it just fell off pretty much in my hands as I was taking other bits off. So I'm going to run without a dust shield here. I don't know if that's going to make any difference in the long term. I don't think you can buy just the dust shields. You have to buy like a whole new hub. Worst case scenario is that dirt and shit is going to get into the bearing and it's going to knacker the hub, and I'm going to need a new hub anyway, which will come with a dust shield. So the way I see it is just run it without and see what happens. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to put the new disc on. Just going to grease up the screws so that they can be undone again a bit easier. Okay, so that's the new disc on. I'm going to give it a bit of a clean before I put everything back together. I've got some brake and clutch cleaner. That just gets all the grease and crap off. I'll give it another clean in a bit. Okay, so the next thing is to put the brake caliper bracket back on, which is this here. So I'm just tightening up the bolts behind there. Okay, so they're tight. This clip keeps falling out, but that's okay. I can put that back like that. Okay, so now I've got to fit the brake pads, and they kind of go yeah, in like this. So that little plate thing to tell you when you're running low, that goes at the bottom and at the back, so like that. But I'm not going to leave them like that. I'm going to grease up the two bits here and here just to let that slide a bit easier. Okay, so now that they're in, I'm going to apply a little bit of grease to the backs, and then we're going to try and get the caliper back over the new brake pads. Right, so the next stage is to just slide this caliper back over those two brake pads there. But there's actually like a little dimple on the brake pads, and that has got to line up with one of the dimples on the piston, otherwise you won't be able to push it on all the way. So you might have to adjust those little dimples so they line up with that little, the dimple with the nipple. We don't line up the dimple with the nipple. Before I do that, those two little slide pins from earlier need to go back in, so I'm going to put those in with a bit of grease. And with these slide pins, as you put them back in, there's like a flat bit. These flat bits have to be at the top and the bottom. Get my two bolts ready. And again, this bottom one is a right pain to get to because of the brake pipe there, so I'm going to need to use a spanner on that one. Okay. So we're all back together. It's a bit tight, but okay, so we're now running quite smoothly through the brake pads there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to whack the wheel back on so I can give it a bit more of a better turn, and then we can test the foot brake. Look at that, spins lovely. Okay, brake seems to work. Seems to stop it. Let's test the handbrake. Work that up. Yep, pretty solid. I can just about move that, so the handbrake might need a bit of adjustment, but that's pretty good. Right, so I've taken all the axle stands away and the other jacks, so this is the last jack to go. Right, so now I'm just going to make sure those bolts are tightened up on the wheels. Right, so let's take the Civic for a little test drive. Already I've tested the brakes a little bit, just pulling off the driveway, make sure they do definitely stop. Yeah, they feel good, and so far haven't heard that telltale noise. Yeah, okay, so you might hear some clanks and stuff, but they're I think they're exhaust related. I need to look into that. But as I'm driving now, I can tell straight away that the brakes were binding on before, because of how free the car coasts. So I've put my foot down on the clutch and just let it coast for a little bit, and yeah, it just keeps rolling, still rolling. I definitely would have come to a complete stop by now with those brakes before. Still going, still coasting in neutral. Still rolling. Still rolling. Right, well, there's a car behind me, so I can't keep coasting forever. But yeah, so I'm calling this job done. Stops lovely. That's another problem checked off the list. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, give it a thumbs up. Leave me a comment down below if you've got any questions, and I'll catch you on the next one.